Thanks for the reminder. We're recording.
Perfect. Then I'll start.
Should we just do it again? Let's do the introduction again for the recording.
Okay, sure, yes.
So here today with the Hydra Meetup number 7, we have Karen Palacio, live coder, programmer, and artist from Córdoba, Argentina. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks, Mark. So, woo! Okay, let's start. I'm going to share the screen. And we're going to start with the presentation, which I called Some Experiences and Thoughts So Far. My name is Karen Palacio, also known as Kardaver on social media. And I'm going to start by introducing myself. So, yes, my name is Karen Palacio, and I want to admit that I live a double life. On one hand, I'm an industrial programmer, and on the other hand, I'm a creative programmer. As an industrial programmer, I'm an AI software architect on a local company from where I live. And I also have a career as a creative programmer, where I mainly do 3 branches of creative programming, which also intersect all the time, obviously, but I like doing interactive installations, especially surrounding collaborative environments through hacking existing messaging apps. I also research creative applications of artificial intelligence, and well, I'm a live coder, vjing using Hydra mainly, and Hydra is my life. But this double life that I carry on is merged on my free software activism, both on my industrial job and on my creative work. I use mainly free software, and I also carry those jobs through a feminist lens and a feminist lens of technology and philosophy of technology. I think that what also informs what I do is where I'm from. I am from Córdoba, Argentina, in South America, which is a geopolitical periphery. It's a periphery inside a periphery. It's not the central place of the country, which is itself in the global south. And that has impacted my work in very material, concrete ways. Firstly, on the formation I got and what I studied. When I started studying and I finished high school, when I had to choose what to study, there wasn't a path that was interdisciplinary enough for my tastes. So what I did was I built a path, the tough way, which is an institutional way. I did 3 years of physics, 3 years of visual arts, and 3 years of computer sciences, but I don't have like the paper that can put a signature on that kind of formation, because here degrees are 5 years long. So I made that path by walking and with the intuition and hope that it will come to fruition, and that hoping that I was going to be able to merge all those interests on a career, on a single career. And another way that this impacts the peripheral reality of my location is the conditions in which I usually work and research. The technical aspects like projectors and LED screens I work with, and the kind of money to be able to carry out long-term research and things like that is really hard to come by where I live. So that's also really tough. But even with those conditions, I carried on my path. And what you can see on the screen was my first live coding experience. I had heard about Hydra thanks to a friend of mine, and we are both programmers. So we were like, yes, let's add our own shaders. Why not? Let's see how this software works. And a month later, we were performing on an underground noise show, surrounded by hippies of all kinds of musical tastes. And 3 years later, I was here through a lot of work and a lot of experimentation on Cosquín, which is the most massive traditional festival of Argentina, and is also the most traditional one. So being able to perform here was a dream I never thought I could dream of. It was truly a crazy experience. Through those 3 years that I have been live coding so far, I have live coded on a multiplicity of scenes. The main ones that I started with have been noise shows and experimental music shows and raves, but I have also performed for tropical, cumbia, cuarteto music, orchestral music, like jazz, baroque, classical music, conferences, art, tech, and the intersection, pop and rock bands, and folkloric, which is native music from Argentina. So I think that the synesthetic characteristic of Hydra, of thinking about visuals through oscillators, has also translated to my career as a live coder. I have known more and felt more closely to different music genres through live coding and through thinking visually about them. The three main scenes in which my bread and butter are raves, noise shows, and folkloric festivals and shows. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about those three and what I learned and how different they are, this kind of specificity of these scenes. I will define live coding in a rave as programming while people dance. So I want to show you how that looks like in different places and with different DJs. Well, I love programming while people dance, and I love programming while I dance. And I feel it as entirely connected as a way of keeping the rhythm myself, and I always dance while I live code. But I think that raves have a very specific energy that I really, really love. But something that comes with it is the long formats of the presentations, the performances I have to do, which on average are 6 hours of continuous live coding, but that have gone up to 8 hours of live coding. So those are the conventions for the vjing jobs here. And if I want to do live coding in those shows, I have to stick to those conventions, and I have done it, and I absolutely love it now. I think that it's transcendental. When you go over the 3-hour mark, you begin to think in a different way, and you reason with the code in a different way. There comes a moment where you really can't keep up thinking about what you're coding, and you start in a flow state and dancing, and well, the alcohol helps. So it's amazing. I love it. It's also a restraint game because where you don't want to burn yourself out, and you don't want to walk yourself into a corner visually and stylistically. So that's kind of a me problem, because I really want to program. Like when I get there, I want to start coding like crazy, but I have to remind myself, okay, this is going to be 6 hours long. I can do that. I can keep up that rhythm. And it's also, I think, a place where there's a pure craft element of vjing, which is you can't light the place up with your visuals because you will kill the rave, which is something that happens and that can happen. So you have to say the most with the least light when the light is your medium as a VJ, and you have to follow the night's progression, and you have to be able to read people as they dance. I want to show you some noise shows. That's me recording while I live code on stage. And maybe a little bit of this more performative piece. So on my shows, the short format really lends itself to doing something noisier and something trashier. And in those places, experimentation is the convention and what people expect. So it really pushes me to be conscious of the conventions of expressivity and of the mediums that I'm using so that I can push it forward. And it's also my place for experimentation with creative software development. When I want to develop something, I usually wait for some noise show to come up and to call me to perform, and I develop it for that show, and then I do like variations of that same software. For example, this software is called Árbol, which means tree, which was made for a performance with marmota strings, which have a very linguistic oriented sound and music performance. And so I made a semantic search and visualization tool that uses NLP, natural language processing. And with this, I can live search from a word until a space of semantic relations and draw graphs of eponyms and hyperonyms. And I can also draw live English analysis, syntactic analysis of the sentences. And for another noise performance, which was very politically charged, and it was about police brutality in Córdoba, I made a system that on open frameworks that shows photospheres, glitched photospheres of different places of the city, for example, the cathedral and other places. And I think I can show it a little bit if I have it. Yes, here. So you can see it working. Here is the bus terminal. The cathedral, and I programmed a few little tricks so I can have different visual elements and glitch it following the rhythm and the noisiness of the noise show. Then I think that I'm going to talk about the folklore, which in contrast with the raves, which are in which live coding is programming while people dance, noise, which is programming while people don't dance. Folklore, in folklore, live coding is programming while people dance traditional dances, and that's the main difference. And the characteristic of the visuals is very different. I have a different palette of icons and iconography that I use in order to be read as folkloric visuals. And I try to inject some of the experimentation, the visual experimentation that I'm interested in. And I perform with a music artist called Horacio Vanegas, and I have traveled along Argentina with him on tour. I'm part of the band now, And through live coding, I have been able to change how I see my own country. I have changed how I feel about my country. I have lived things that I never thought I was going to live, all thanks to live coding. And a main difference that has folkloric in relation to, for example, electronic music is that it has a very strict tempo and song format, which is introduction, verse, hook, second verse, outro. So live coding through that strict format means that you have to have a lot of strategies in order to be effective and to be able to impact and follow that the impact of the song. There's also a very the underbelly of the tension between the traditional aspect of what we do and the innovation that we want to bring. The fact that I'm using icons, but I'm doing it through a very experimental form. I think that it's something I really, really love about live coding folklore. And it has also been an opportunity for me to connect with the struggles and joys of our people in Argentina.
Karen, it's
Yes.
now 5 minutes.
Yes, so I'm going to wrap up. Perfect. So visuals, as I see it, potentially have an architectural, rhythmic, conceptual, contextual, and embodying role in contrast to conventional, the conventional way of doing visuals, which sadly or paradoxically is doing something that isn't meant to be seen or to be paid attention to. I think that they have a lot of potential in events. I see doing visuals as woven multidimensional texts that have the time dependency as a key factor, which involves rhythm, that they are geographically, politically, and spatially located, and that they are constantly in relation to the body and mind of the participants and affecting their body through a very specific filter, which is the nervous system. And I also think that live coding highlights software's multiple roles, which is that it is this, a knowledge maker of a people, what we can implement, we can think of. It's also a key actor on defining people's powers, and since it mediates people's access to human rights. It's also a corporal expression method, as I have seen, and lived through my body. And it's also a very effective knowledge liberation tool. And through my whole work, my dream is to achieve something that can break the digital art dichotomy of mere technique and mere surface by injecting meaning and semantics to what we do. So thanks, and I'm open to questions and commentaries in case you have some.
Thank you so much, Karen. Everyone, let's give Karen a set of snaps or applause or whatever. You can unmute yourself now.
Yes.
Okay, let's open this up. So does anyone have any questions for Karen? You can either raise your hand, you can do, you can speak up, you can speak in the chat, whatever is comfortable for you. Okay.
Yeah, I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, so I was curious about the more traditional, performing at the more traditional festivals. Did you get any pushback? I saw that some of you had the code up on some of the visuals that you had. Did you get any pushback from that? Or is it just like completely accepting of that practice?
The musicians loved it.
Yeah.
They knew beforehand what I do, and they contact me specifically because of what I do and they had already seen the kind of visual work that I carry on. I have received more pushback from the experimental circles from where I live, because it's like, it's weird, it's kind of elitist, how they go about what they do. And it seemed like I went to the mainstream or something like that, or it's kind of a tense relationship with the more experimental people here. But I also, when I work with a musician, I'm always upfront about my request for absolute creative freedom to propose. That's like, we're only going to work if I have absolute freedom. So they knew beforehand that that's how it was going to be.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It feels like it would be the opposite. If experimental would be more open, and then the more like traditional shows with gigantic crowds and stuff would be more restrictive to it. But yeah, I think setting expectations up front makes a lot of sense to combat that.
Thank you, Empty Flash. We have a raised hand, Richie. You had a question?
Yeah, not a question, but also like following the question that Empty Flash made, that I think it, like you should also know that Horacio, the band that Karen plays with, is actually a bit experimental themselves in the circle that they're in. Like they use a lot of rock elements, and they use electric guitar, which is in some spaces not well seen. Also,
Yes,
that are like more conservative and are like, you should only use all
they
the
are.
instruments and
Yes,
instruments. But so
that's a great
it seems like it's also
context
part
cue.
of the philosophy of the band, including yourself, of course, Karen.
Yes, that's a great context cue. They are seen as very experimental. They have introduced new forms, new song ways. O sea, they are seen as very experimental by the traditional scene.
Sky had a question.
Yeah, more comment, but I love how you described kind of getting into a flow state in a live setting when you're coding live visuals for music. And I also am a visualist and do visuals for bands and DJs and raves, kind of similar to you. But yeah, it was just really cool to see the overlaps with that, because I don't do live coding in my VJ setup. I'm working mostly with hardware and old mixers and stuff. And for me, I just love that feeling when you feel like you're also this extension of an instrument for the band. So you're not like, it's not like, oh, here's the band and here's some accompanying visuals. It more feels like, I don't know if you feel this way, Karen, but it almost feels like we're the extra band member in a way, and we have a live instrument and we're improvising with them and flowing with them. And I don't know, to me, I totally vibe with that flow state you were talking about. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you could just expand on the flow state a little bit more. And do you resonate with that feeling of like also kind of being an extra member of the performance and not just like
Yes.
this thing in the background, you know?
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of my flag that visuals are not a background for anything. And what I really like to feel, and how I usually feel when I live code, is a circuit is put in place when there are people that are vibing and dancing, and I am doing visual work, and there are sound and musicians, sound artists, and there is also the person that is operating the lights, and there is the sound designer, and there is also a context, a larger cultural context. And so I always feel that as a circuit that like interlocks and lights up the moment we are sharing that space and that time together. And I really like to feel it like that, like even beyond the musicians that are doing giving some part of the total stimulus that is happening in that place. That's like a really important fact to me to put in place. In fact, when musicians contact me and start talking like they want me to be a background something, I usually reject those jobs. Like, no, I don't do just simple visuals. Like I don't do those kind of jobs because
we don't do that.
No, you're going to be really surprised if you contact me and I get there and you expected like some simple visuals, because it really comes forward what I do. It's usually something that people talk about after, and because it pulls attention away from the musicians. And then about the flow state, I think that when you live code, you have to keep in mind so many things at the same time, and our random access memory just overflows, and you start accessing the disk, or you have to you try to keep up with your consciousness and with reason, and it always overflows because the code grows and things start or not working or working in unexpected ways, and you don't know which part of the code especially after the 4-hour mark or something like that. The code is like a Frankenstein that does all sorts of things that you have never done before in your own house. So it's like you have to go with the flow, and you have to make that decision too. Like you either go with the flow or you clean everything, clean the code and start over. And it's always like keeping up with that, keeping up with your own errors. You start making mistakes and like flashing lights in the wrong places, and lighting up the rave, for example, which kills the mood. And it's tough emotionally, mentally, and physically, because I'm usually dancing the whole time. So that contributes to the trance and flow state, which I'm totally addicted to at the moment. Like I'm addicted to that, and I love in the traditional festivals the energy of the people dancing and reliving something that they have lived through their childhood, and the songs that they have listened to time and time again. It's like a ritual to make something come alive again. It's really, I love that energy.
Thank you.